everybody, I hope you're well. I had a lovely day, whatever you've been up to. I'm going to read you chapter 6 we're on. I'm going to do 6 and 7 today, and this one is called The Platinum Blonde Man. I wonder what Matilda's pranks are today. There was no doubt in Matilda's mind that the latest display of foulness by her father deserved several punishments, and as she sat eating her awful fried fish and chips and ignoring the television, her brain went to work on various possibilities. By the time she went up to bed, her mind was made up. The next morning, she got up early and went into the bathroom and locked the door. She was already, as we already know, Mrs. Wormwood's hair was dyed brilliantly platinum blonde. It was very much the same glistening silvery colour as a female tightrope walker's tights in a circus. The big dyed job was done twice a year at the hairdresser's, but every month or so in between, Mrs. Wormwood would freshen it up by giving it a rinse in the wash basin with something called platinum blonde hair dye, extra strong. This also served to dye the nasty brown hairs that kept growing from the roots underneath. The bottle of platinum blonde hair dye extra strong was kept in the cupboard in the bathroom, and underneath the title on the label was written, "Caution, this is peroxide, keep it away from children." Matilda had read it many times with fascination. Matilda's father had a fine crop of black hair, which he parted in the middle, which he was exceedingly proud of. Good strong hair, he was fond of saying, means there are good strong brains underneath. Like Shakespeare, Matilda had once said to him. Like who? Shakespeare, Daddy. He was brainy. Very, Daddy. Oh, sorry, Daddy said, was he brainy? Yes, Daddy. He had masses of hair, did he? He was bald. To which her father had snapped, if you can't talk sense, then shut up. So rude. Anyway, Mr. Wormwood kept his hair looking bright and strong, or so he thought, by rubbing into it every morning large quantities of a lotion called oil of Violet's hair tonic. The bottle was a smelly purple mixture, and it always stood on the shelf above the sink in the bathroom alongside the toothbrushes, and the very vigorous scalp massage with the oil of violets took place daily after shaving was completed. His hair and scalp massage was always completed by loud masculine grunts and heavy breathing and gasps of, that's better, oh, that's stiff, rub that right into the roots, which could clearly be heard by Matilda in her bedroom across the corridor. Now, in the early morning privacy of her bathroom, Matilda unscrewed the cap of her father's oil of violets and tipped 3/4 of the contents down the drain. Then she filled the bottle up with her mother's platinum blonde hair dye, extra strong. She carefully left enough of her father's hair tonic in the bottle so that when she gave it a good shake, the whole thing still looked reasonably purple. Then she replaced the bottle on the shelf above the sink, taking care to put her mother's bottle back in the cupboard. So far, so good. At breakfast time, Matilda sat quietly at the dining room table eating her cornflakes. Her brother sat opposite her with his back to the door, devouring hunks of bread smothered with a mixture of peanut butter and strawberry jam. The mother was out of sight, just around the corner in the kitchen, making Mr. Wormwood's breakfast, which always had 2 fried eggs on bread, 3 pork sausages, strips of bacon, and some fried tomatoes. At this point, Mr. Wormwood came noisily into the room. He was incapable of entering any room quietly, especially at breakfast time. He always had to make his appearance felt immediately by the creating of noise and clatter. Once he could almost hear him saying, "It's mine! Here I come, the great man himself, the master of the house, a wage earner, the one who makes it possible for the rest of you all to live so well. Notice me and pay me your respects." On this occasion, he strode in and slapped his son on the back and shouted, "Well, my boy, your father feels he's in for a great money-making day today at the garage. I've got a few little beauties I'm going to flog to the idiots this morning. Where's my breakfast?" "It's coming, treasure," Mrs. Wormwood called from the kitchen. Matilda kept her face down low over her cornflakes. She still didn't dare to look up. In the first place, she wasn't at all sure what she was going to see. And secondly, if she did see what she thought she was going to see, she wouldn't trust herself to keep a straight face. The son was looking directly ahead out of the window, stuffing himself with bread and peanut butter and strawberry jam. The father was just moving around to sit at the head of the table when the mother came sweeping out from the kitchen, carrying a huge plate piled high with eggs and sausages and bacon and tomatoes. She looked up. She caught sight of her husband. She stopped dead. Then she let out a scream that seemed to lift her right into the air and drop the plate with a crash on the floor. Everyone jumped, including Mr. Wormwood. "What the heck's the matter with you, woman?" he shouted. "Look at the mess you've made on the carpet." There she is. "Your hair!" the mother was shrieking, pointing a quivering finger at the husband. "Look at your hair! What have you done to your hair?" "What's wrong with my hair?" "For heaven's sake," he said. "Oh, God! Dad, what have you done to your hair?" the son shouted. A splendid noisy scene was building nicely in the breakfast room. Matilda said nothing. She simply sat there admiring the wonderful effect of her handiwork. Mr. Wormwood's fine crop of black hair was now dirty and silver, the colour of the tightrope walker's tights, and that had not been washed for an entire circus season. You've dyed it!" she shrieked. "Why did you dye it, you fool? It looks absolutely frightful. It's horrendous. You look like a freak." "What the blazes are you talking about?" the father yelled, putting his hands into his hair. "I most certainly have not dyed it." "What do you mean I've dyed it? What's happened to it? What is this, some sort of stupid joke?" His face was turning pale, the colour of sour apples. "You must have dyed it," said the son. "It's the same colour as Mum's, only dirtier looking." "Of course he's dyed it. It can't just change colour by itself. What on earth were you trying to do? Make yourself look handsome or something? You look like someone's grandmother gone wrong." "Get me a mirror," the father yelled. "Don't just stand there shrieking at me. Get me a mirror." The mother's handbag lay on the chair on the other side of the table. She opened the bag and got out a powder compact, and there was a small round mirror on the inside of the lid. She opened the compact and handed it to her husband. He grabbed it and held it before his face, and in doing so spilled most of the powder all over the front of his fancy jacket. "Be careful!" shrieked his mother. "Now look what you've done. That's my best Elizabeth Arden face powder." "Oh, God!" yelled the father, staring at his little mirror. "What's happened to me? I look terrible. I look like you. I look just like you, gone wrong. Sorry. I can't go down to the garage to sell cars like this. How did it happen?" He stared around the room. First at the mother, then at the son, then at Matilda. "How could it have happened?" he yelled. "I imagine, Daddy," Matilda said very quietly, "that you weren't looking very hard and you simply took down Mummy's bottle of hair stuff instead of your own." "Well, of course that's what happened," the mother said. "Well, really, Harry, how stupid can you get? Why didn't you read the label before you started splashing this stuff all over your hair?" It's gone terribly wrong. I'm only meant to use 1 tablespoon in the whole basin of water, and you've gone and put it all over your head. It will probably take all your hair off in the end. It's going to burn to your scalp." "You mean I'm going to lose all my hair?" the husband yelled. "I think you will," the mother said. "Peroxide is a very powerful chemical. That's what they put down the lavatory to disinfect the pan. They only give it another name." "What are you saying?" the husband cried. "I'm not a lavatory pan. I don't want to be disinfected." "Even diluted, like I use it," the mother told him. "It makes a good deal of my hair fall out. So goodness knows what will happen to you. I'm surprised it didn't take the whole of the top of your head off." "What shall I do?" wailed the father. "Tell me quick, what shall I do before it starts falling out?" Matilda said, "I'd give it a good wash, Dad, if I were you, with soap and water, but you'll have to hurry." "Will that change the colour back?" Father asked anxiously. "No, of course it won't, you twit," the mother said. "Then what do I do? I can't go around looking like this forever." "You'll have it dyed back," the mother said. "But wash it first, or there won't be any hair there to dye." "Right," the father shouted, springing into action. "Get me an appointment at your hairdresser this instant for a dyeing job. Tell them it's an emergency. They've got to boost someone off in their list. I'm going upstairs to wash it now." With that, the man dashed out of the room, and Mr. Wormwood sighed deeply, went into the telephone went to the telephone to call the beauty parlour. "He does do some pretty silly things now and again, doesn't he, Mummy?" Matilda said. The mother, dialing the number on the phone, said, "I'm afraid men are not always quite as clever as they think they are. You will learn that when you get older, my girl." I am going to read the next chapter because it introduces my favourite character. So let's see if you can work out who she is. The next chapter is called Miss Honey. Matilda was a little late at starting school. Most children begin primary school at 5 or even just before, but Matilda's parents, who weren't very concerned one way or the other about their daughter's education, had forgotten to make proper arrangements in advance. She was 5½ when she entered school for the first time. The village school for young children was a bleak brick building called Cruncham Primary School. It had about 250 pupils, aged from 5 to just under 12 years old. The head teacher, the boss, the supreme commander with this establishment was a formidable, middle-aged lady whose name was Miss Trunchbull. Naturally, Matilda was put in the bottom class, where there were 18 other small boys and girls about the same age as her. Their teacher was called Miss Honey, and she could not have been more than 23 or 24. She had a lovely pale oval Madonna face with blue eyes, and her hair was light brown. Her body was so slim and fragile, one got the feeling that if she fell over, she would smash into 1,000 pieces like a porcelain figure. Miss Jennifer Honey was mild and a quiet person who never raised her voice and was seldom seen to smile, but there was no doubt that she possessed that rare gift for being adored by every single child under her care. She seemed to understand totally the bewilderment and fear that so often overwhelm young children who for the first time in their lives are herded into a classroom and told to obey orders. Some curious warmth that was almost tangible shone out of Miss Honey. That was out of her face, and she spoke to a confused and homesick newcomer to the class. Miss Trunchbull, the headmistress, was something else altogether. She was a gigantic holy terror, a fierce tyrannical monster who frightened the life out of pupils and teachers alike. There was an aura of menace about her at her distance. When she came up close, you could almost feel the dangerous heat radiating from her. When she marched, Miss Trunchbull never walked. She always marched like a stormtrooper, with long strides and arms swinging. And when she marched along the corridor, you could actually hear her snorting as she went. And if a group of children happened to be in her path, she ploughed right into them. Thank goodness we don't meet many people like her in this world. Although they do exist, many of us are likely to come across at least one of them in our lifetimes. If you ever do, you should behave as if you would if you met an endangered rhinoceros in the bush. Climb up the nearest tree and stay there till it goes away. This woman, in all her eccentricities and her appearance, was almost impossible to describe, but I shall make some attempt to do so a little later on. Let us leave that for the moment and go back to Matilda and her first day in Miss Honey's class. After the usual business of going through all the names of the children, Miss Honey handed out the brand new exercise book to each child. "You've all brought your own pencils, I hope," she said. "Yes, Miss Honey," they chanted. "Good. Now this is the very first day of school for each one of you. It's the beginning of at least 11 long years of schooling and all you're going to have to go through. And 6 of those years will be spent right here at Cruncham Hall, where, as you know, Headmistress Miss Trunchbull let me, for your own good, tell you something about Miss Trunchbull. She insists upon strict discipline throughout the school, and if you take my advice, you will do your very best to behave yourself in her presence. Never argue with her, never answer her back. Always do as she says, and if you get on the wrong side of Miss Trunchbull, she can liquidize you like a carrot in a blender. It's nothing to laugh about, Lavender. Take that grin off your face. All of you will be wise to remember that Miss Trunchbull deals very severely with anyone who is out of line in this school. Have you got the message?" "Yes, Miss Honey," chirped 19 eager little voices. "I myself," Miss Honey went on, "want to help you learn as much as possible. while you're in this class. That is because I know it will make things easier for you later on. For example, by the end of this week, I shall expect every one of you to know 2 times tables by heart. And in a year's time, I hope you will know all the multiplication tables up to 12. It will help you enormously if you do. Now then, do any of you happen to have learnt your 2 times tables already? Matilda put her hand up. She was the only one. Miss Honey looked carefully at the tiny girl with dark hair and a round, serious face sitting on the second row. Wonderful, she said. Please stand up and recite as much as you can. Matilda stood up and began to say the 2 times table. When she got to twice 12 is 24, she didn't stop. She went right on to twice 13 is 26, twice 14 is 28, twice 15 is 30, twice 16 is... Stop, Miss Honey said. She'd been listening, slightly spellbound, to this smooth recital, and now she said, "How far can you go?" "How far?" Matilda said. "Well, I don't really know, Miss Honey. For quite a long way, I think." Miss Honey took a few moments to let out a curious statement stick in. "You mean," she said, "that you could tell me what 2 times 28 is?" "Yes, Miss Honey." "What is it?" 56, Miss Honey." "Well, what about something harder, like 2 times 487? Could you tell me that?" "Yeah, I think so." "Are you sure?" "Why, yes, Miss Honey. I'm fairly sure." "What is it then?" 2 times 487 or 974, Matilda said immediately. She spoke quietly and politely without any sign of showing off. Miss Honey gazed at Matilda in absolute amazement, but when she next spoke, she kept her voice level. "That is really splendid," she said. "But of course, multiplying by 2 is a lot easier than some of the bigger numbers. What about the other multiplication tables? Do you know any of those?" I think so, Miss Honey. I think I do." "Which ones, Matilda? How far have you got?" "I don't know. What do you mean?" "I mean, for instance, do you know the 3 times table?" "Yes, Miss Honey." "And the 4 times?" "Yes, Miss Honey." "Well, how many do you know, Matilda? Do you know all the way up to the 12 times table?" "Yes, Miss Honey." "Well, what are 12 sevens?" 84, said Matilda. Miss Honey paused and leaned back in her chair, behind the plain table that stood in the middle of the floor in front of the class. She was considerably shaken. This exchange had taken care not to show it. She had never come across a 5-year-old before, or indeed a 10-year-old, who could multiply with such easiness. "I hope the rest of you are listening to this," she said to the class. "Matilda is a very lucky girl. She has wonderful parents who've already taught her to multiply lots of numbers. Was it your mother who taught you, Matilda?" "No, Miss Honey, it wasn't." "You must have a great father then. He must be a brilliant teacher." "No, Miss Honey," Matilda said quietly. "My father did not teach me." "You mean you taught yourself?" "I don't quite know," Matilda said truthfully. "It's just that I don't find it very difficult to multiply one number by another." Miss Honey took a deep breath and let it out slowly. She looked again at the small girl with bright eyes standing beside her desk, so sensible and solemn. "You say you don't find it difficult to multiply one number by another," Miss Honey said. "Could you explain that a little bit?" I think I'm going to stop reading here because this video is getting quite long and I don't want you to get bored of listening to this amazing story. So I'm going to pause halfway in to this chapter, and tomorrow I'll start again. So I hope you all have a lovely day, and I'll see you tomorrow.